Greetings out there in YouTube land, and welcome to the part 2 video in the Silvertone 1485 amp restoration extravaganza. Today we begin our archaeological dig on the speaker cabinet. First we'll check it out externally, and then we'll go inside for the sad and scary truth. And look who just joined us. Here comes Casey, who has the makings of a workshop cat. Okay, after Rusty passed away, I haven't had any furry companionship out in the workshop, but looks like she's going to change that for us. Okay, let's get started. I'm out in the sun here in my courtyard for two reasons. First, it's a beautiful day. It's probably 70 degrees, and the workshop itself is rather cold. And second, there's no room for this thing in my cluttered workshop. So let's work outside in the sun, and that'll cut down the chances of contracting any terrible airborne diseases too. There she is. Hey, Casey. You going to join us? You going to help me with this amp? Huh? You little beast. In many ways, the speaker cabinet is sort of just a larger version of the head cabinet, in that it's been covered with the same hideous black naugahyde, but without the padding. Nice original handle on top. As we go around, though, we can see that some of the original Tolex is peeking through, and also we've got an area right here, pretty bad structural damage to the frame around the grill cloth. Speaking of which, it looks like burlap to me. I mean, price was no object, I guess, when they built this thing. One hole here that doesn't look too scary, but one down here that makes me a little worried. Still have the nice Sears Silvertone name tag, but if you look in, it looks like something has pooped all over that Jensen speaker cone, so hopefully that is salvageable. There's also some nibbling on the cone perimeter, which is never a good thing. Well, we'll have to pull it out and take a look. Okay, we see some more rough areas, and then a really bad rough corner with the lovely nail repair here that's been hammered into the particle board. And all in all, I think we're going to have to strip off this black naugahyde and see what lurks beneath. And Casey will stand guard here while we do so that no more rats can come and damage the mighty 1485. Looking here at the rear of the cabinet, we see that the 2 acres of naugahyde that they bought to do this recovering job was inadequate to cover the back panel, which has been mercifully left in the original Tolex material. We can see down here that the little latches are still in place to hold the amp in under the speaker cabinet. We also see lots of nice rodent urine soaked particle board waiting in there to infect us, and also a glimpse of those glorious Jensen C10Qs. Let's pull off the back door here and see what horrors lurk within. Okay, I got the back panel off here, and as expected, some staining, probably rat urine, as well as on the floor of the cabinet. But then look at those glorious Jensen C10Qs, all 6 of them. Okay, now this one down here, if you look, they put a cushion, they glue it to the back of the speakers. This cushion's missing, so when you put the amp in down here, it won't come right up and bang right against the magnet. So I guess that when the cushion came, so did this piece of the speaker label. This particular speaker's got some nibbling down on the suspension and some pooping, but I believe the other 5 speakers are just perfect. Also, notice every one of them has the same date code, 220 for Jensen and 542, which I'm going to take as the 42nd week of 1965, and they all have identical date codes on them. Okay, So these would then definitely be the original speakers in this cabinet. Hey Casey, what do you make of this, huh? You see any rats to chase? As some of you may know, these monstrous cabinets came with a separate caster unit that could be bolted from underneath to the cabinet. So you could roll it around on the caster board and then disconnect it and set it down on the floor. And right down here you can see the two kind of recipients for the screws and the caster board that would come up through the bottom. Well, I guess it's time to get a soldering iron and disconnect the wiring from the speakers so they can be removed individually from the baffle. Also, before I do, I thought this might be some groupie undies here that have gotten snagged in the cabinet, but instead I think they're little pouches so that when you roll up all the wire, you can tuck it in here to be toted around when the amp is stashed inside the cabinet. Also, the generous use of masonite in the cabinet is a tip-off to who actually built this amp, which you know is Dan Electro. I think they had the market cornered on masonite for years, and they used it liberally on their guitars and amplifier cases. Anytime you see this, think Dan Electro. Okay, I've removed all the speakers. There was like 6 or 7 nuts holding each one in. And the barely 1/4 inch masonite baffles in sort of rough shape. It's kind of warped up. There's places where the studs, the screws are pulling right through it. So I think I'll probably have to replace this baffle before I reinstall the speakers. Notice we got DF here and EM over here. Probably the original techs that installed the speakers in the cabinet and wired them. Okay, let's go inside now and take a look at the speakers. I've arranged the speakers in the same order that they were removed, and as you can see, the bottom 3 seem a lot dirtier and rougher than the top 3. However, as we've seen with the chassis, a wet rag and some Windex and car wax can probably spruce up these baskets and magnets. Let's flip over the top 3 and look at the cones, however. That's really the important part. Anytime I see an array of really precious vintage Jensen speakers like this, it occurs to me that their value is probably worth more than the whole amplifier. I can imagine that somebody restoring a blackface Fender Princeton would dearly love to have any one of these speakers. But we're really not here to part this out. I'd really like to put it all together and have it work as it did when it was first made. So let's take a close look at the cones. They're filthy. There's a radial split right there. Little wrinkling. That one looks pretty good. Remember, these are the top 3. This one looks fine, but the baffle gasket's coming loose. Same thing here. These must have had some moisture on them. The gaskets are loose. But it looks like in the top row, everything is good. No rubbing voice coils, other than that split, which will be easy to repair. Now let's look at the bottom 3. I don't think they're going to measure up to be as good as these. Okay, let's look at the bottom 3. Because they're closer to the ground during storage, they're more likely to have gotten wet. This one has 2 repairs and I think has a rubbing voice coil. This one has got sort of a lumpiness to the perimeter of the cone. See how it goes down there? And rubbing voice coil too, I believe. And then the one that was such a mess that has the insect or rodent nibbles along there and the poop, and another little ding right up here, is the only one without a rubbing voice coil. So it looks like these 2 may need to be reconed. This one I may try to repair it, or I might have to recone all three of these. So this is getting to be a fairly expensive proposition. Okay, I'd really hope that this reconing wouldn't be necessary. Let's see what a little Windex and car wax can do for this poor old wretched speaker. Okay, now see what you think. No repainting, no clear coating, just washing and waxing with auto wax, and the speaker looks pretty much like new, both inside and out. Now let's look at the price you pay for using a crappy masonite baffle. Everywhere that a screw passes through that gasket and pulls the masonite toward it, it makes a deep dent in the gasket. Now this gasket is supposed to be completely flat and fit very smooth and uniformly with the speaker baffle, and as you can see, that's impossible with it in this shape. And you really just can't change the gaskets because they are glued quite solidly to the cone itself. So unless you're going to recone the speaker, you pretty well have to live with the lumpy gaskets. Okay, we're outside now on day 2 with the speaker cabinet. I thought during the night about what I want to do with this. Do I want to throw it in the fire? Do I want to smash it with a sledgehammer? And then I came up with a third alternative. Let's fix it up, okay? First off, I'm going to pull this baffle and replace it with a like 1/2 or 3/4 inch piece of good solid finished plywood with properly cut holes. Notice, because of the flimsiness of the masonite, they had to cut like 8-inch holes for 10-inch speakers, so they would have enough material here for support. Okay, and I'm going to change that. Oh, and here's Casey again coming to join us. I'm going to replace it then with the type of baffle it should have had in the first place. And I'm also going to remove all of the hideous leather, or leatherette I should say, so that we can see what the original material looks like under it. And then also my intention is to cover over this floor because it's just too disgusting to allow it to be exposed. So it should be a big day. Okay, let's get. Looks like our trusted assistant Casey is ready to get involved in this project. So let's get started. For those of you who participated in the staple counting contest, the grand total was 178 staples. These are little groups of 25. So the winner is welcome to let me know when they're going to come and pick up their fabulous prizes. It's getting a little hot out there in the sun. It's probably going to be close to 80 today. Eat your hearts out, all of you in more Arctic climes. But I'm going to put this up on the bench to remove the staples. I think there'll be a whole bunch more than there were on the head cabinet. Casey, it looks like she's joined us in the workshop. I'm telling you, this cat has the makings of a true workshop cat. Ah, there, she's anointing my welding table. Good girl. Well, I removed all the staples from this flap on the floor, and I peel it back only to find another flap with twice as many staples. Notice all the nibbling that's been going on here on the original grill cloth. Not a good sign. Also, a viewer complained that I used the word urine too much in the first video, but I'm not sure what other word you can use to describe this. Okay, what I'll do is I'll try to use other terms so as not to offend his delicate ears. How about bladder juice? Okay, we've got all sorts of hideous residue here of bladder juice and kidney nectar. But hopefully with the addition of a new floor over this one, we should be able to keep that from our delicate nostrils. Look at this mess right here. Was the upholsterer trying to overcome the tidal pull of Neptune on the Naugahyde? I mean, come on, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11 staples right here? Good grief. So I removed all of the staples from the perimeter of the rear of the cabinet, and now I look at the bottom and oh boy, a whole bunch more. Well, I got that little bib off the bottom. Those of you familiar with Spanish slang will probably appreciate it when I say this is more like nalgas hide than naga hide. I think you'll agree too. Okay, this is the bottom, and I'm getting excited when I look at how nice it is until I come around to this side and see that it's been pretty well stripped. It's just destroyed. And over here on this side, they left some of the material and then took the rest. Okay, so pretty much a disaster from the Tolex angle. I pulled all that naga hide forward and then cut all the way around the perimeter to get it out of my way. Now the baffle has to come out before I can pull all these staples, and because there's a ridge here and there's a ridge at the rear, that's impossible. So I'm going to have to partially disassemble the cabinet so that I can get this baffle out of the way. This is another nice touch where this molding right here has been broken inward so that it made an angle. I guess this could probably be put back, glued back into shape, but without proper Tolexing material that matches this, I'm kind of at a loss as to how to proceed. Well, I figured out a trick to get the baffle out. This angle was cut for a reason. I got to looking at it and I thought, well, if the baffle comes back, maybe it can just clear that angle and then come out through this opening. And it did, and here it is. Casey's investigating it. You can see it's a flimsy, warped nightmare, okay, that will just have to be replaced. Now I have access to the remaining 9,000 staples that I can remove to get all of this hideous black vinyl out of the cabinet. Well, after removing this many staples and about 3 acres of nalgas hide from the cabinet, let's take it outside in the sun so we can see the true horror of what we face. First off, we have this ridiculous joke of a speaker baffle, water damaged, warped, weak, and miserable. Notice that they framed it here with a perimeter piece of extra masonite to space the grill cloth away from the gorgeous baffle. Okay, I'm going to extract all of those original speaker studs from this and then burn it in the nearest bonfire. Now it's time to revel in the magnificence of this pristine cabinet. As we saw, the bottom looks good. Okay, but that's about it. Look at the side. Then we can come around here. The front molding is a mess. Corners destroyed. This piece of molding we've already looked at, and it hasn't gotten any better. Okay, a real disaster with nails used to hold it together. Here's the top, and there's a kitty cat. Okay, and then of course is that horrible floor. I'm trying to think what I can call this without irritating that sensitive viewer. How about excretory fluids are present in rather nauseating amounts. So we've got a real mess here, as well as the neighbor's dog barking at us. Probably smells the cabinet. You know, if it weren't for the weird impedance demands of this amplifier head, I'd probably throw this thing in a bonfire. But instead, I'm going to come up with some way to restore it. Now, I honestly don't think that this material is available, but I might be able to come up with something that will go along well with the head that's, say, similar, if possible, and maybe recover this and redo the floor, correct all of the damage, make a new speaker baffle, recone 3 of the 6 speakers, And that's all, just little minor things like that. Okay, so I need to think about it for about a couple of minutes to decide whether this gets the torch or gets saved. Well, I just got back from the fabric store and I got a material. Of course, you can't exactly match the Tolex on the Silvertones, but I got something that sure reminds me of it. It looks actually fairly close. When you get up, you see it's sort of a tweed, but it has those little black specks and the silver and the gray and pretty much all the right colors. So I think it's going to work okay with that head. It's fortunate I live in a town where huge amounts of automobile upholstery are done, and these shops have been around for like 50 or 75 years, and they save the old material. So I was able to get a couple yards of this stuff. I also got a really nice piece of half-inch finely finished plywood to make the speaker baffle, so that I can throw the Masonite monstrosity here, courtesy of Dan Electro, in the trash bin. Okay, I know we'll hate to see that go. Okay, now I'm pulling the pristine grill cloth away from the magnificent speaker baffle. You see the kind of about a 1-inch strip they run around the perimeter, and that spaces the grill cloth away from the face of the baffle, exactly the same way Fender does. I have a theory on why. Why don't you tell me what you think? Now I can harvest all those speaker studs from the baffle. I'm using the old cabinet as a workbench. In this condition, that's about all it's good for. Alright, I squared up the old baffle with the new plywood and then outlined each of the speaker cutouts and the outer edge to give me guidance for cutting out the new speaker baffle. Naturally, I'm going to be cutting these holes a little larger because this plywood is a whole lot stronger than Masonite, and I don't need as much of it between speakers to maintain the strength. As you can see, Dan Electro is using 6.5-inch holes for 10-inch speakers. That's got to attenuate some of the sound and air movement from each speaker. And that's why I'm going to go with the larger cutouts. Now this is about the hole diameter that was in the Masonite baffle. It's a little over 6.5, close to 6 3/4, but you can see that a great deal of the cone is hidden behind the baffle. I'm going to go with a hole diameter of about 7 3/4, which means that the entire moving part of the cone then will not be obstructed in any way by the baffle. And here you can see the comparison between the original small cutout and the much larger one that I am going to make. Alright, we cut out the baffle to size with the table saw, and I have trimmed it a little bit at the bottom so that it would fit in the cabinet easily, and leave room on the edges for the material. That's a very common mistake. When people cut a speaker baffle, they don't take into consideration the material is going to wrap around both sides and make it a little wider and a little taller. This baffle now should fit in and out fairly well, and I think is going to be a whole lot better than the Masonite. Well, it's day 3 on that Hideous 1485 cabinet, and as luck would have it, we're having a rain and windstorm, but I'm still going to work outside. We're going to cut those holes in the speaker baffle today, so I'll set up the camera and show you a little trick that was taught to me by a viewer. I had been using a saber saw to cut these holes, which was just hideous, but as you'll see, using the router makes it a whole lot easier and a whole lot. First, you make a hole in your router table that is the exact radius that you want for your speaker cutout holes. And then we're going to drill a hole here at the center of our prospective speaker hole, and one at the perimeter at the proper radius. And for this particular job, we're just going to use the old trusty straight-sided 1/4-inch router bit. Then you drop a 1/4-inch bolt, in this case, through the wood and the hole in the router table, and I'm going to start the router and then just spin the wood around. A little bit of light sanding, and we have a virtually perfect 6-speaker baffle that is probably 10 times stouter than that warped and beat up old original Masonite one from Dan Electro. There you go. Baffle in place. Things are looking better already. I'm starting to feel a little bit of optimism. Next, we carefully position all 6 of the speakers on the baffle board and then mark the holes for where the studs will be installed in the speaker baffle. Now the speaker studs are installed in the baffle, drilling a hole a little bit smaller than the stud, then pressing it into place. I even recess the heads a little bit. Then you apply as much super glue as the joint will take between the threads and the wood, and then screw down a nut on a washer as tight as you can to lock it in place and make sure that it is perpendicular to the baffle surface. Later then we'll remove the nuts and washers and the baffle will be ready to accept the speakers. Then using some 1/4 by 3/4 pieces of wood, you frame the outside of the speaker baffle, glue those frame strips down, and then use a pneumatic stapler, in this case, to hold them in place while the glue dries. This is going to hold the grill cloth away from the speaker baffle. Then the final step is to paint the entire outer face of the speaker baffle flat black so that none of it will glare through the grill cloth and be visible. Especially in here, these surfaces around the perimeter of the speaker holes, they will show more than anything if you don't paint them. Okay, it's time to do something about this disgusting floor of the cabinet. I'm going to lightly hand sand it with a vacuum, sucking all the dust up so I don't inhale it. I'm going to wear a mask and gloves, of course, and go kind of slow so I don't kick up a whole bunch of whatever this is into the air. Now, while I'm waiting for the floor to dry out, I'm going to fix all this broken wood down here on the lower left corner of the cabinet. It's a real mess. I can't imagine what they banged this thing into. Well, I think it's time to get started on the covering of the cabinet. We're going to try to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. And I'm going to start with the top, and we'll see how it turns out, if there's any hope for the rest of the cabinet. Our assistant is about to take off to her brand new bed, but she'll be keeping an eye on us. Looks like somebody's trying out their new bed. What do you think, Casey? You can lay down. I know Rusty used to. Well, it looks like somebody likes their new bed. What do you think, Casey? Probably the first one you've ever seen in your life. We got to get comfortable here. Oh, a little grooming. This is the before picture of the right side of the cabinet. Okay, here's that hideous right side. Looking pretty good, I think. I'm real proud of these corners. They're very complex, but I think they came out pretty nice. From a distance, it sort of looks like the original. And here is the after view of the top. It's not perfect, but I think you'll have to agree it's a whole lot better than it was. Well, that's about the cutest thing I've seen in a long time. Sleepy little kitty in her bed. We're talking about you. I think we have the makings here of a real workshop cat. Looks like we have a sleepy kitty. And here's the left side. Sort of a yin-yang effect here. Soon to be a covered over effect. Okay, so that's before. Okay, here's a close-up of the top and the right side. I really like this material. It's automotive seat fabric, so it's very durable. Has a great pattern, I think. And from a little distance, it's really not far off from the original, I'd like to think. I still have to do the floor and this front lip right here. Well, it's such nice weather today, I thought I'd bring the cabinet outside for an update on the upholstering. As you can see, it's pretty well done. I even did the floor inside. I sanded off all I could of the residues, 2 heavy coats of oil-based paint, and then I upholstered it. So I think we're in real good shape here on the floor, and the only missing part is the back panel, and I have it in the workshop where I use the table saw to trim about a 1/16 of an inch off of each side of the panel to compensate for the additional width due to the wraparound of the material. I know now you're wondering, did he upholster the bottom of the cabinet? And here's your answer. Yes, I did. I used it actually to overlap all of the wraparounds from the sides and front and back to hold them down. And now I'm going to go pick out, after I do the back panel, some nice casters, which I'm going to attach directly to the cabinet. Originally they had a board that this would attach to that had casters on it. That just seems like overkill to me. So I can never imagine wanting to carry this around without casters. So I'm going to go buy some nice swiveling ones and install them on the bottom of the cabinet. But first, let's do that back panel. Also, as one little touch, I put foam over the edges of those blocks so that when you slide the amp head into the floor of the cabinet, you won't damage the upholstery material on the sides of the head. Also, the speaker baffle is finished. It's been sprayed with several coats of flat black paint, and now is ready to have the grill cloth wrapped around the front and the speakers added to the rear. Okay, here's the inside of that rear panel, all upholstered. I went ahead and wrapped all the way around to cover this ledge because there was some, shall we say, residue from the furry inhabitants. Now, flip it over and you see that it is just smooth as glass. I really have come to love this material. I got it at first just to match the overall color and sort of distant appearance of the original, but this tweed I think is just gorgeous and real classy. I'm going to see if they don't have more of this. I'm going to wrap more amps with it if I can get more of it. Also, since it's automotive, it's durable and is stain resistant. I polished all the screw heads and then installed the rear panel in the cabinet. Now it's a matter of installing the baffle with the new grill cloth and the casters on the bottom of the cabinet, and the cabinet will be finished. Oh yes, and the handle on top, of course. Here is the speaker magnet view of the inside of the cabinet. Well, I just got back from the fabric store where I was trying to find a match for the original grill cloth, which is a fine weave burlap. I don't know if all these discolorations are normal or not, but what I found was another fine weave burlap that has all sorts of gold sparkles in it, which I thought was really nice. And it is a little bit darker, but I think it's going to look just fine on that speaker baffle. We'll see in just a few minutes. Okay, here's the speaker baffle with the grill cloth pulled really tight Okay, it's like a drum head almost. And now it's time to install the baffle in the speaker cabinet. Let's see how it looks. Alright, the 3 good speakers are all waxed up and detailed and installed in the upper row inside the speaker cabinet. I'm waiting for the reconing kits so that I can repair and then install the bottom 3 speakers. The top handle has been installed on the top of the cabinet, and now I need to install the upper panel, and the cabinet is as done as it can be at this stage of the game. I just had to share this with you. A viewer sent me an amplifier in this box, and apparently he had a bunch of extra stamps laying in the drawer and put about 80 first-class stamps on this. World War I and Star Trek. What a combination, huh? And then, as if that weren't enough, no, they hit him up for an extra 99 cents. Okay, you start to realize just how expensive it is to ship stuff when you see it in stamps. Well, I guess that about does it for this part 2 video on the mighty 1485 speaker cabinet. I think you'll have to agree it looks a shade better than it did. It's not perfect, but it's definitely solid, and it passes the sniff test from Casey. So I think it's time to sign off and start preparing for our part 3 video. I wanted to express my gratitude to all of the viewers who are Patreon patrons and PayPal contributors, as well as other viewers who have sent me parts and given me good advice on the restoration of this unit. I'm now going to get the amplifier head out and start dissecting it and restoring it to where hopefully we will end up with a really nice sounding amplifier. I'm also waiting on the 3 speaker reconing kits so that I can finish this cabinet. So please stay tuned. We're going to have a second edition of the 350 Chevy engine series, and then we're going to sign off until our part 3 video. See you then. Bye for now. Now that the block has been drained and flushed of water and antifreeze, it's time to drain the old oil, both from the oil pan and from the oil filter. I'm going to screw the filter back on just to keep the engine sealed, but of course we'll install a new oil filter before I try to start this thing. Okay, it's time to drain the old oil from the oil pan. I washed out my tub so that there'd be no residue in it from the radiator draining. This way, after I drain the oil, I can check it for metal particles and things like that. So here we go. Ugh. Looks like tar. People just never change their oil often enough, I don't think. Another trick I've picked up over the years is, while you have the oil pan empty, go in with a wire and rub it along the bottom of the pan, pull it out and check to see if there's any sludge. You'll know if there is, you'll feel it while you're trying to slide the tip around on the floor. In this case, I don't see any at all. Therefore, I'm probably not going to remove this oil pan. It's no fun to do, and it's even harder to get it back and sealed properly, and this one doesn't seem to leak. Now, while trying to remove the oil filter with an oil filter wrench, we encounter the work of the Lord of the Idiots, which is to put on an oil filter with about 100 pounds-feet of torque. I don't understand it. Now I'm going to have to probably drive a screwdriver through this thing and use a breaker bar or pipe to get it off. Really, really stupid and unnecessary. Okay, before I get out the screwdriver and sledgehammer, let's see how this works. I've used a hose clamp to put a heavy piece of angle iron very tightly against the side of it with this protruding. I think if I tap this, the whole filter will come loose. Let's see. Well, we're about to enter the twilight zone of nightmares. I used the hose clamp with the L angle steel. It didn't budge it, it just punctured the case. Then I hammered through a big screwdriver and used a 3-foot piece of pipe on it. All it does is tear up the filter, it won't come loose. So I got to think of something more. Well, it's about 2.5 hours later and I finally got the oil filter out. I had to destroy every bit of it except, of course, for this top flange here, and then I made a tool with a couple grade 8 bolts that would fit into these holes, and then with both feet on the header downpipe, I was able to unscrew it. I broke like 3 of these bolts in the process, but I finally did get it out. I have no idea what sort of torque was applied to this thing, because I've never in my life ever encountered anything like this, and I hope never again. And here's what's left of the oil filter. If I weren't so tired, I'd take the sledgehammer and just hammer it into the ground. Maybe tomorrow I'll have enough energy to do that. Well, the end of a long and miserable day's work. It's getting cleaned up, stripped down to the basics. I screwed on a new oil filter just to keep the engine sealed. Made a lot of progress today, I think. But that's the way we'll leave it until tomorrow, and we'll figure what to do next. Well, it looks like Jack insists on helping with the video. He's a little jealous over all the attention that Casey's been getting. So here he is. He's joined us. Get that belly. Get that fat belly. Okay, Jack, you going to help?